Okay, so today we are looking at day 5 of our static postural assessments. This will be a little bit different than our other classes. Traditionally, we kind of dive into the PowerPoint and we go slide by slide by slide by slide. This class today is going to be a little bit different just because it'll be a little more of a free-form discussion on posture in general. Because until now, the first half of class, we did a lot of anatomy, we did a lot of physiology conversation. The second half of this class is really meant to be much more of like a practical side of things where we observe people's posture and we look at them and we say, okay, I can see what's happening, this person's feet are flat, right? And so that's causing their ankles to pronate, which is causing their knees to cave in, which is causing their hip to internally rotate, right? So we see like, that's going to cause like low back pain. That's often going to cause like weak glutes, loss of athleticism. It can result in torn ACLs. There's a million things that can kind of happen. And it all started from like the bottom of their foundation, right? It started at the foot. So, that's sort of a lot of the conversation, not necessarily every day for the rest of this course. Like we're also going to look at like, hey, this person didn't do very well on a cardio assessment. What does that mean for their heart and lungs, and we're going to look to see, it's like, oh, this person didn't do very well on an agility assessment. What does that mean for their athleticism? So we're going to look at a lot of different assessments over the rest of this course. The main one that we're going to spend a lot of time on is the overhead squat assessment. And that's that one where, we're putting stress on the entire body from top to bottom, and we're looking at how someone squats. And we're looking to see, do they have certain bad habits? If they excessively lean forward, what does that mean? Do their knees cave in? What does that mean, right? And that'll tell us like what exercises to give our clients. Well, even more basic than the overhead squat is just a classic static postural assessment. And so when people were first starting to assess posture, they were kind of looking at these 3 most common postural distortions. And you'll hear them referred to as Jonda's postural distortions. And, it was just this person who was like looking at sort of the 3 most common ways people sort of have these posture problems, right? Like these alterations that we typically tend to see. And so like what you're going to see that the 3 most common are going to be what's called lower crossed syndrome, which I'm actually not getting a great picture of here. Let's see here. We'll just look that one up separately. Lower crossed syndrome. And this is lower cross syndrome is where you can, yeah, there we go. I want the X. You can see weak muscles in the abdominals in the front and weak muscles in the glute in the back, right? So what's happening in a lower cross syndrome situation is that you get a client who has this kind of thing going on, this sort of anterior tilt to their pelvic, right? Like this person here, if you look at their pelvis, it's not rotating backwards, it's not rotating forwards, it's nice and in alignment, right? Their abs aren't being pulled into length, and their glutes aren't being pulled into length. But in this version over here, you can see, they've kind of got this anterior tilt. And then that's also causing up top, you can see this is what's called upper cross syndrome. And so like they're very much related to each other, right? A lot of times when you get an anterior pelvic tilt, you also end up with shoulder rounding, right? And what you're kind of seeing in this person here. So if you look at lower cross syndrome, right, that is that classic anterior pelvic tilt. I like to call it Instagram booty because I think that's like a really funny term for it. Because you will, it kind of looks like somebody's just like sticking their butt out, this big arch here. But what's really happening is they're just getting pulled like this. Their pelvis is not sitting the way it's supposed to. So we're going to be looking at that one today. We're also going to be looking at pronation distortion syndrome, which is this version.
Hey, I got a question.
Yes, what's up?
Will Power Clean fix that posture?
No. I'll tell you what's going to be. That's what we're doing today. So we're gonna go over it. Power Clean is going to strengthen certain muscles, but that is a power movement, right? Super explosive, and generally that's not the type of movement that we use when we're trying to alter someone's posture. It's not enough time under tension for their brain to relearn how to do the movement, right? right? That makes sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, we want to make sure that's why the stabilization phase. That's why the stabilization phase is for a high number of repetitions, and it is at a slow tempo, because that gives your brain time to learn the movements. If you don't give your brain enough time to learn how to do it because you're doing something super explosive, your brain's not going to know how to recreate it. It would be like, you know, it'd be akin to me giving you one lesson and then being like, all right, that's everything you know about your NASM. Have fun, go, you know, and then sending you out to take your test. Like, it's just not quite enough time to sort of learn how to do it. But I do like the power clean a lot. It's one of my favorite movements in the whole gym. But yeah, does that answer your question, Noel?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so let's get back to looking at our. So I'm still kind of introing everything, right? So let's look at pronation distortion syndrome next, right? So this is another one. This is one of Jonda's 3 most common postural distortions, and you're going to see this kind of posture right here, where you see that flat foot that we talked about, right? Someone's foot's flattening downwards like this. That's causing what we call pronation of the ankle. And then what that causes, you can see this kind of flattening here. Well, that causes like this internal rotation. Actually, here's an even better picture. You can see this kind of internal rotation of the tibia there, right? And then that causes internal rotation of the femur, which is causing like problems probably up here at the hips, right? Generally, people will get this in both legs, but sometimes it happens in one leg. And then you can even start to see, they're kind of drawing it in this version, where the spine is sort of being tilted to one side as well. So this can even cause like scoliosis-ing, which is not a real term, but yeah, it can cause a scoliosis where someone gets like a lateral curve to their spine. So that's another really common one. And then the most common, well, I wouldn't say I'd say this is the most common actually, is this foot flattening one. I'd say this is probably the most popular. Yeah.
Question. So this what you're talking about right now, it's called pronation distortion syndrome, which is typically caused by being flat-footed.
Yes, or it's either caused by being flat-footed or it causes flat-footing. Okay. It can go in both directions. Because one thing, see, Charlie, this is one thing that we actually spent a lot of time talking about before we had you join us. One thing about like the body is that when it comes to human movement, we refer to your muscular system working with your skeletal system, working with your nervous system, those 3 working together, that's called the kinetic chain. And we call it a chain because like if one of them gets messed up, it's going to mess up all of them, you know?
Yeah, like a reaction, right?
So yeah, it's like, well, is it flat-footed that's causing the ankle, or that's causing the distortion, or is it the distortion that's causing the ankle? There's really, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Right.
But if you were born flat-footed, this is something that a lot of people will kind of struggle with for a very, you know, it's something you kind of need to work on. This, you know, if you are sort of flat-footed in just like my mom, like she's pretty flat-footed, just always has been. And so like, if that's the case, you know, you need to take time to kind of work on these things and develop your balance in your foot and the strength in your foot. So you don't have to suffer from some of these problems that we're going to talk about today.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And then we've got upper cross syndrome. So this is our 3rd most common. Well, I gotta stop saying that. This is our 3rd distortion, and this is that classic like forward head posture. This is 2020 posture. You know, this is smartphone posture. You know, where you see like that rounded shoulders and forward head. Look at how far, like, you know, this ear here is in line with the shoulder almost, right? And over here it's a couple inches forward. So you can see, you know, they're kind of craning. They got that turtleneck situation going on. So this is sort of what we see in upper cross syndrome. So those are the 3 most common postural distortions, and they're what we call our static postural distortions. So that's kind of what we're going over today. I know that was kind of a very, very, very long intro, but that is sort of where our conversation is going today. We're only going to be on a few PowerPoint slides today, and then we're going to kind of dive into what those postures mean and sort of how to work with them. So before we move on, or before we move into those though, I do want to really quickly, key up the idea that we are moving into assessment land here. And I want to talk about like what I mean when I say like a fitness assessment, right? So that's what this whole course is meant to be. This PFT 101 is all about like the essentials. So we got a little bit of anatomy and physiology out of the way, but it's very much about fitness assessments, right? That's our main conversation. And we as a trainer, we're going to assess for a lot of different things. We want to know how someone's posture is, which is what we're talking about today. We want to know how strong they are. Noel, you've brought up power cleans a couple times. I know you're a big fan. So if my goal as your trainer, or if your goal is the client and I was training you and you were like, I want to get my power clean 1 rep max up. I want to clean, a really heavy weight. I'd be like, great, let's do it. Let's figure out what your baseline is first though. So then like I'd take you to the gym and I would do a 1 rep max assessment on the power clean to figure out how that goes. So that'd be part of my assessment process. Let's say I got a client whose goal is weight loss. So I'd put them through like a body fat percentage test, figure out what their body fat percentage is, figure out what their inches are, I would do an assessment. So fitness assessments by sort of definition here, right, are a systematic problem-solving method that provides fitness professionals with a basis for making educated decisions about exercises and acute variable selection. So, let's break this whole thing down, right? First off, it's a problem-solving method. And I know some of you guys are new here. And then some of you guys have heard me talk about problems. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to problem solving. I actually really love the art of problem solving. I'm really into that. And it's basically this kind of 3-step method. If you go to a mechanic, they're going to go through this 3-step process. You go to a dentist, they're going to go through this 3-step process. You go to a doctor, right? You go to a trainer, all of us, we kind of go through this general 3-step process. If you get a problem in your life and you want it solved, think of these 3 steps. Step 1, you need to identify very clearly what the problem actually is. So that's always going to be the first step when it comes to problem solving. And this is where like a lot of people kind of mess it up from the beginning. When they go into like, they have like a problem or something, is they kind of dwell on the problem, or they dwell on the wrong pieces of information. They dwell on like something that is not relevant, right? So I'll give you an example of me where I kind of goofed this up. So the other day, my roommates, I like came down from the morning class, and I come down and my roommates are like looking at me, and one of them's like, "What's up, milkman?" And I was like, "What does that mean?" I was like, "What happened?" Very clearly something went wrong while I've been gone. And it turns out like one of my like milk containers leaked out of the fridge and then just was covered all over the floor. And I jumped to the conclusion very quickly because I didn't want to be wrong, because nobody wants to be wrong. So my brain was like, well, I'll spare you from being wrong and I'll give you a piece of bad, irrelevant information. And I was like, well, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had to put my milk sideways because the fridge was full. Like that's me totally just like deflecting blame, And then it was like, well, here it is. And he held it to me and it showed that I just didn't put the lid on right, which is a much more obvious, accurate answer. So I had like irrelevant information that I used to sort of describe. Didn't matter. That's totally irrelevant to what happened. The problem was I didn't put the lid on right. I was a dummy. So that's part of like step 1. You always want to identify a problem like very, 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 very accurately. And then once you've got that accurate definition, you can move on to step 2. Now in our realm, what that means when we talk about like identifying a problem as like a personal trainer, we want to identify any goals that our client has, any issues related to like their structural capacity, and any issues related to their functional capacity. So like if I've got a new client, they come to me and they're like, I want to lose weight. I'm going to go, okay, great. And I want to get a really clear definition of what that means to this person, right? So I'm probably going to ask them a few more questions. Like, it's like, okay, well, why do you want to lose weight? Like, what's your overall weight loss goal? How many pounds? Like, what are you thinking? Just off the bat. I mean, I can help you sort of like, reevaluate and we can come up with a goal together. But you tell me just like, what are your instincts? How much weight do you want to lose, do you think? And they're like, oh, I don't know, enough to to, you know, fit into this one dress for my daughter's wedding that's coming up soon. And it's like, okay, so like your goal, yeah, you have like a weight loss goal, but like what's really important to you, it sounds like, is that you want to look a certain way. So if I were to say, like, what would happen if you were to lose 5 pounds of fat and gain 5 pounds of muscle, which means that your weight didn't stay the same, but you had a 10-pound difference in your body composition? Does that still match up with your goal? You know, you'd be a little toner, you'd have a little less body fat, but your body weight would be the same. Is that like an okay, is that still like, you know, within the realm of what your goal is? And then that person goes, they kind of like, you know, I've walked people through this version of that a million times, and they kind of light up and they go, oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I don't want to lose weight. I want to get fit. Great. Okay. So now we have a very clear definition, right? So let's get some information that's not just your scale weight. Let's figure out what your inches are. Let's figure out what your body fat percentage is. And then let's track some of your strength gains, you know, like let's see if you get stronger over time as well. You know, when we're looking at more pieces of when we're looking at all those pieces of information, that's going to tell us if we're making progress rather than just your scale weight changing, you know, because your scale weight could change if you drink a bottle of water before going to bed one day. And then don't the next day, you know, because generally you sort of dehydrate overnight. Like a lot of that's why your mattress gets so heavy over years. You guys ever hear that? Like your mattress doubles in weight over 10 years, which is such a nasty thing to know. But it's just like all the, you know, fluids that kind of leak out of you at night and then they get stuck in your bed. Sorry to ruin everyone's day with a nasty fact. But, you know, it doesn't happen every day. If you're dehydrated going to bed, you're going to be even more dehydrated when you wake up, which honestly means you're going to be pretty light in the morning, you know? So, hey, weight loss goal achieved, you know? Not really, right? So I loved it. Like the first thing you need to do is you need to identify the problem that your client is trying to achieve, whether that's their goal or something related to their structural capacity, you know, if they have alterations in posture, or if it's related to their functional capacity, you know, if it's related to how they're able to move, you know. For those of you who were in our last module, and this is none of the new students, but remember we talked about the tug test with our senior clients, right? That kind of almost seems silly assessment where you stand up, walk around a cone and sit down. That's someone's functional capacity. You're measuring their agility. You know, it doesn't seem like the hardest test in the world, but for a senior, that's a great way to kind of see how functional they are, you know? So that's our goal of assessment. That's the first step. A mechanic, they're gonna do the same thing, right? They're gonna, I always use mechanic as an example, and I know nothing about cars. They're gonna hook your car, you know, up to the computer, and it's gonna tell them like, yeah, you know, you got something's going on here, you know, or they're gonna like listen to a sound that your car is making. They're gonna check the valves, right? They're gonna look for what's going on with your car. Or like a dentist is gonna, you know, look inside of your mouth. A doctor's gonna give you an X-ray. So you always want to start sort of problem solving with the first step, which is assessment, and that's what this course is, right? We're teaching you guys all the assessments. Now, step 2 in problem solving is, you know, is actually solving the problem through program design. Now, this is the one that always kind of confuses people because it is like literally, you know, this is the 3 steps to problem solving, right? Well, step 2 is solve the problem, which kind of sounds weird. But solving the problem doesn't mean the problem's gone. We got to kind of change if you think that like solved means finished, we got to change your definition. Solved means to come up with a solution, right? So solving the problem in our realm as like a trainer is we write a program to address any of the structural or functional problems that we saw in our fitness assessment. So that's where I write a program, or you write a program for your client. That problem is now solved. It's not the problem's not gone. That's where step 3 is going to come in, but you have come up with a solution for the problem, right? Solve the problem through integrated program design. You're going to interpret the data that you collected in your fitness assessment, and you're going to write a program to address any of these dysfunctions. So if we go back and we see pronation distortion syndrome, right? And we see this rotation again. I'm gonna write, we know what's happening. We know the foot is flattening, the tibia is internally rotating, and the femur is internally rotating. So what do I need to do? I need to write a program that everts the foot, that externally rotates the tibia, and externally rotates the femur. I need to write a program that does the opposite of all of these things. And if I put it all on a piece of paper, the problem, I write out that program and I give that program to my client, I've now solved the problem. But how many of you guys have maybe you've purchased a program off the internet, or you've had a trainer write a program for you, or you've gone online and found like a really good program and put it all together? Your client can have the greatest program in the world. Doing it is where step 3 comes in. And step 3 is implementing the solution with integrated training. And this is where you figured out how to write a program, you wrote the program, now you're going to go train your client. So step 3 is implementing this solution that you came up with in step 2, right? You're going to actually train your client. So now it involves taking that program to the gym, working with your client however many days per week, and actually fixing this posture problem until it's gone.
I got a question.
What's up?
You know this posture right here. You know them DVDs they be having. It's called like Insanity and all that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
It's all at your same pace, but with this posture, that shit just it really does. You know what I'm saying? It really wouldn't work, right?
So here's the thing. I want to be really fair. Actually, can you do me a favor? Can you mute your mic just while I'm answering? So I want to be super fair when I talk about like those programs. There's a lot of, we call those cookie cutter programs, because it's kind of like somebody just took a cookie cutter and was like boop 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 and gave them to everybody. I don't actually hate cookie cutter programs as much as a lot of other trainers out there do. You would think that I would, because I spend most of my career really talking about the importance of custom stuff. But I think that sometimes when people have opinions on stuff like this, they tend to be all or nothing opinions. And I don't want to really have that approach. Those programs, Noel, they are really good for a couple different reasons. They're really good at making exercise in general super approachable to people. So they make it easy for people to adhere to. They usually are based on hey, anyone can do this and anyone can do it in their living room. And I think that's really cool. I think the world needs stuff like that. And they burn a lot of calories, which, a lot of times is one of the best fixes that you can do. A lot of people, we know obesity is the #1 struggle in this country. That's the biggest problem that we have when it comes to fitness, cardiovascular health. So burning a lot of calories is going to have a really positive effect on that. Even if those calories are being burned in a way that is not super ideal, I'm still glad that there are people out there who are burning calories. Now, that's me being fair. Let's be a little unfair here and talk about where those programs suck. The biggest problem that they have is exactly what you said. They're not customized. They are cookie cutter programs. If you have, it's rare. One of our postural distortions, let me show you guys. One of the postural distortions that we have is bow-legged syndrome, which is very uncommon. Knees cave out. So occasionally you'll see people who have what is called knee varus. It's a bow-legged syndrome. It's really just, you barely ever run into it. A lot of times, actually, the times that it's very hard to find a picture. But a lot of times when you see people who have bow-legged, it's so funny. So look at how many of these pictures are good posture pictures, because they're yeah, don't let your knees cave in. It's I don't want knees cave in, I want knees cave out. It just doesn't happen that often. Actually, this is not bad. This is a knees cave in over here, and he's got kind of a knee cave out over here going on. That kind of helps. This is too much. Actually, there you go. This guy's saying that this is right, and I totally disagree. That is too much cave out right there. So you'll see people with that type of posture every now and then. And what it is, when somebody has tight when they have a bow-legged posture, they actually are overactive in muscles that are often underactive. They're actually overactive in their medial glute, the side of the butt, which is so often a muscle that we're like, you got to turn your medial glute on. We're constantly talking about how that's weak. In these people, it's actually too strong. It's too developed. And that's why it's so rare, because this doesn't happen very often. But if somebody like that were to go on a program like Insanity, right? And Insanity is one of these programs that have you doing like a lot of side shuffles, right? It's like a lot of, I'm in socks right now, and I have a hardwood floor. If I do too much side shuffle, I want to eat it. Like, here we go. I'll get on my little rug. So like they're doing a lot of side shuffling, right? And it's just a lot of like this thing, or they're doing like ice skaters, right? That's a very glute heavy exercise. If you were to give something like that to somebody who already has bow-legged posture, the only thing that can happen is that it would make it worse. So yeah, cookie cutter programs definitely have their faults. They also tend to focus on the other big problem that they have. They also tend to focus on muscles that are, I don't know, I like to call them vanity muscles, your mirror muscles. They do a lot of arm work. They do a lot of ab work, which is only effective if they successfully lose the weight with it, but it feels very effective because it like burns like crazy. So then a lot of people who do it, they feel like they're succeeding. So those programs are designed to make people feel like they're getting success, but it doesn't always actually result in success. And a custom program built for someone specifically is always going to be better than a program that is general. That's why we do these morning Zoom calls, right? This is why I always encourage you guys. Like, I record these videos so you can watch them later, but like, I want you on these calls so you can ask me questions. That's how I customize your learning to you, That's why I love questions. I always ask you guys, like, give me questions, and sometimes it's silent, and that's okay. But like, I always check in because like, that's how I'm making sure that like you're getting the custom side of things rather than just a general. I mean, you guys all have your textbook already. You can just read it and try to go take your test. But you want that custom technique. That's what's going to sort of differentiate you when you get to the real world as well. Sorry, no, I think I answered your question with a 20-minute monologue. Did that answer your question though? You hit on
I got another question, man.
Okay.
You say about the test, we can take it as soon as we ready.
To a certain point. I don't want you getting too far behind though. Oh.
I'm talking about
your overall math. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't tell you when to schedule. Your relationship with that test is separate from your relationship.
What chapter is it on, man? Like, what chapter in the book is it?
All of it.
All of it?
Yeah.
God damn, but it's only 100 questions.
That's why you got another whole book.
Yeah. All right.
I will tell you though. Actually, let me see here.
But how many questions is gonna be on bone instruction? Certain things.
So I'm gonna go. This isn't really the day to talk about that. But I will spend. I'll give you another 30 seconds. It'll be on. This is how much. So the science stuff. 17%. So that's 17 questions. The assessment stuff, which is what we're doing in this class, 18 questions. Right. Program design and exercise technique. This looks like 2 categories, but they're 1 category. So that's 43 questions. Most of the questions are, how many reps do you give your client? Blah, blah, blah. Which exercise is, most important for a client? Blah, blah, blah. Right. So that's the biggest chunk. And then coaching, 12%, and then professional development, which is the class that we're going into after this course is over. Our 8-day class that's coming up after PFT 101, 10%. So,
a quick question, Brad, about the test.
Yeah, what's up?
So what? I know you guys see yesterday, but so we go through let's say a practice test regarding the NASM, right? But you said you guys still don't know where we would be taking it, right?
Well, there's only a few places you can take it. So and we're going to help you schedule it, but we don't make you schedule it. If that's what I wanted. Yeah, we're going to give you the codes, and then you'll have an account that you know the password to, you know the username to. We don't know any of that.
Right.
And then we're here to help, like we're a resource. So like if you're like, hey, Brad, can you help me schedule my test? I'd be like, yeah. And you just go to well, actually I can't show you because it's on you. It would be
Yeah.
backdoor. But yeah, I'll help you schedule it. There's a facility in Burbank. There's one in Van Nuys, but I've never once seen it have a time available. So like, I don't know what's up with that one. And then there's one in Woodland Hills, and there's one downtown. I got mine downtown. I got mine on Wilshire.
All right.
I was living in LA when I finally took my exam. I got I went to school in Portland, but I had moved down here by the time I went to go take my test.
Understood. Is there a fee for that, or is that included? Like,
It's all included. Yeah. And if you don't pass it, which is not going to happen to anybody in this call, you just have to come back to us and let us know. And then we call NASM for you and schedule a retest. And you get a retake for free. And then after that, then you take it again.
All right. And for the nutritionist certification and the corrective exercise, is that also do we have to take tests for that too, or is that all?
Yes, you do, but those are taken at home. Those are what we call sub-certifications. So you don't have to take those at a facility. You can take those from the comfort of your home, which means you can use your notes.
That's like add-ons to having like the NASM certification.
Yeah, exactly. So you can take those as at home. That's why, like, you'll actually notice when we get to nutrition. I think Robert, you're the only one who's actually experienced this. In this call at least. Sometimes I don't spend a lot of time telling you where to find each of the individual, well, no, that's not true. I'll tell you where to find certain vitamins and minerals, but I don't spend a lot of time telling you how much of each vitamin or mineral you need, like how many milligrams per day. And sometimes people ask questions, they're like, how many milligrams? And it's like, that answer is not actually that important. Like, you may be tested on it, but like what you're gonna do and what Mo's gonna help you guys with, and what I always encourage people to do, is just write that list down and keep it next to you on the day of your test, because knowing that in the real world doesn't help anyone. Like, there's no clients in the world, there's nobody who could ever, when they're doing their nutrition, be like, oh, I need another 300 milligrams of sodium, and then they grab like a pinch of salt, and then they're like, okay, that's like, so it just doesn't work. So because that's not how nutrition really works, we don't really teach it that way. But it's an at-home test. So those at-home tests, you're gonna make certain cheat sheets. And those cheat sheets are honestly the right way to go. I don't have a lot of those milligrams memorized anymore. I had to in college, which was stupid. It was a waste of time.
Sounds good, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hot take. Somebody fight me. somewhere, Professor Jorgen is the hair on the back of her neck just stood up. All right. It's been a whole semester making me memorize numbers. Let's take a look at the rest of this assessment stuff. So let's look at these first distortions, right? So coming back to our idea here, what a fitness assessment is a problem-solving method that guides you as the trainer to how to write effective programs. So you don't write a program that is cookie cutter, like, insanity, that you write something that is custom specifically to your client, things to remember about assessments, right? Obviously, it's not designed to diagnose any conditions. We've talked about this a lot of times. You're going to hear me say this 50, 60 times before you leave the program. We don't diagnose anything. That's not our job. We are observing posture. We are looking at someone's structural and functional capacity. That is not the same as, diagnosing. If you got a client who has Like last night, a friend was over and they hurt themselves playing basketball recently, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm just having a little bit of like really low abdominal pain," and I was like, and they were like, and they, I was like, "Is it like this and this and this?" And every sign of what they said makes it kind of sound like he's got a hernia. And I was like, "Oh no," and I was like, "Go see your doctor." He's like, "Do you think it's a hernia?" And I was like, "I don't think anything. I think you should go see your doctor." Because I'm not going to put, if I were to diagnose something wrongly, which I'm not trained to do, we are not trained to diagnose. That puts us at legal problems, and then it's not good for our people either. So we don't diagnose anything, but it does give us a starting point from which to work. It doesn't replace a medical examination or anything like that. So we do not diagnose medical conditions. We don't prescribe treatment. We don't prescribe diet either, or we don't prescribe supplements. Now, we can educate our clients about diets, and we can educate our clients about supplements, but we do not prescribe them. If you asked me, "Hey, I'm looking to increase my, I feel like my strength gains have really stagnated and I'm just not getting any stronger lately, but I'm trying to get my 1 rep max up. I was thinking about taking creatine. Should I?" I will give you advice and say, well, creatine's been shown to be very effective for strength gains, when it's taken in like the proper doses over like a certain period of time. Like every scientific research that's been out there has shown that creatine is very effective for strength gain. But you will notice not once during that sentence did I ever say you should go take creatine, right? We don't prescribe supplements. We don't prescribe food either. If someone just came to me and they were like, "Hey, I've just been feeling like my doctor told me I need to get more fiber, and so like I don't really know how to do that. What type of vegetables should I eat?" I'd say, well, like broccoli is exceptionally high in fiber. Spinach and a lot of leafy greens are going to be your best because those are mostly fiber. So you can get a lot of bulk without getting a lot of like calories. Asparagus is high in fiber. You want to stay, generally unhigh fiber foods or like the vegetables that are very processed. The more processed something is, the less fiber it's going to have. And so again, I didn't tell them to go eat.
I got a question.
Broccoli. Educated them on it.
Yeah, with that broccoli and everything, man, all that vegetable stuff, it got a lot of pesticides. If it's not organic, it got a lot of pesticides and things like that, which cover the food. So you pretty much just eating pesticides and
Run them
vegetables
underwater.
when you can go get fiber from the GNC store or the supplement and take that.
No, this is a long conversation. You and I should stick around after the call. I will walk you through this one-on-one solo. Don't worry about that stuff. Literally rinse it, run it under cold water. It washes them right off. The pesticides and stuff, it's not as scary as you think. There are certain ones that I can tell you about, like certain ones that like there are certain ones that absorb stuff like that a little bit better. So then it gets deep. But most of those things, pesticides, you get what a pesticide is. Oh my God! All right, I'm gonna keep this really short because I know that I'm gonna get sidetracked on this one. They sit on the outer shell. They don't penetrate. Remember, like a vegetable, what the fiber is, right? It's this protective layer, so stuff can't get through. Bugs, the reason we put pesticides on stuff is because we don't want bugs to chew away at that outer membrane and expose that food, right? So they put pesticides on food, and then bugs are like, well, I don't know what that is, gross, and then they fly away, right? Or whatever. Literally, it just sits on top. You rinse it. All you have to. That's why you wash your veggies. It's not about like the dirt that you're going to have on there. Dirt's actually not all that bad. For you. You just gotta watch them.
Right. But at the same time, ain't the when the pesticides is on the greens, when it rain, it all goes down into the soil, and so which soaks up, which makes the plant grows. So the pesticides hits the soil, which feeds the plants to grow. And that means that the pesticides is inside of the vegetables.
So again,
because
though,
of the soil and the feeding.
the water, right? The
Absorption.
water, rinsing it up and breaking them down. So that's not in there. We'll talk more about this. This is a very, very long conversation that has nothing to do with fitness assessments. I would love to have this conversation, but we can't keep talking about this today. But I will totally talk about this. I promise. Just not right now. But yeah, I would love to chat with you more about that. And I'm not super pro pesticide or anything like that. But I will totally kind of walk you through how to make sure that you are getting like healthy options. I will also say, and this is one last little thing, pesticides are less dangerous for you than not eating fruits and vegetables. That is very dangerous. Being vitamin deficient will hurt you way more than a pesticide ever could. So yeah. All right. Let's look at all right, let's look at these. I got to move forward just a little bit in the slides here. Where are we at? Body composition, cardio, posture. Okay, so let's look at our three most common postural distortions. We already talked a little bit about it, but now we're going to look at like what I mean when I say posture. So posture, by definition, right? Every movement that you make, every movement that you make every day has to have some sort of like base of support, right? From which your movement is starting from. That is actually what we call, that's sort of like the technical definition of posture, right? What it is it's the alignment of your body where it can move ideally, right? So when we think about like, we pulled this picture up on I think Friday, but when we look at like a, overactive versus underactive muscle, you see like a muscle imbalance. This is a muscle imbalance right here, right? You can see like this muscle's pulling too much, this muscle's not pulling enough. Therefore, this joint is not sitting at the angle it's supposed to. This is altered posture. Right here, these are even, right? These are nice and balanced, right? Your muscles in your chest are not pulling too much, so you don't have shoulder rounding. Your muscles in your upper back are pulling enough, so your shoulders are sitting nice and upright, and you are in an ideal alignment, so your skeletal system can move the way it was intended to move, right? So that allows for optimal movement patterns. So when we talk about posture, it allows, proper posture ensures that our muscles are aligned at the proper angles and what we call length tension relationships. Remember on Friday, we talked about length tension relationships. So there is a relationship between how long your muscle is and how much force it can generate. If it's too short, it can't generate enough force. If it's too long, it can't generate enough force. Both of those are bad, right? So when you see this overactive muscle, this muscle's pulling too much and it's weaker than it should be. This underactive muscle over here is not pulling enough. It's being stretched out and it's weaker than it should be. So both of these are actually weak muscles. Sometimes when we're describing this, I know that I sometimes have this bad habit. Sometimes when we're describing overactive, underactive, if I'm in a hurry or if I'm just speaking really fast, sometimes I will tell people, it's like, you got one muscle that's too strong and you got one muscle that's too weak. And that's not really an accurate description. This muscle is not too strong. It's just pulling too much, but it's still weaker than it should be. Same thing is true with this muscle right here. This muscle is being stretched out and it's weaker than it should be. So that's what a muscle imbalance is, right? And so we're looking for these ideal length tension relationships. That way our muscles can recruit the way they're supposed to without certain muscles taking over. So we need to look at neuromuscular efficiency and look at like how we are designed to move, right? So without proper postural alignment, we kind of set our body up for failure. We set our body up for a lot of like damage and structural problems and things like that. And so we start to see what we call predictable patterns of muscle imbalance, which is, when I say predictable patterns, right, these are all the things that we're talking about: knees caving in, feet turning out, arms, shoulders rounding, which I'm totally doing right now. Forward head posture, asymmetric weight shifts. We start to see these you start to see the same problems in a lot of people over and over and over and over again. So that's what we start to see when we see these muscle imbalances, right? One weak muscle and one overactive muscle. Or one lengthened muscle, one shortened muscle, I should say. How does it happen? Well, oftentimes it's repetitive movements. I'd say that's the most common cause, repetitive movement patterns. If you work in construction, or if you're a painter or something like that, you actually make a lot of these same overhead movements, which you would think would make you great at overhead movements. But the problem is you end up using one of the muscles in your shoulder instead of the other ones. And then that muscle gets overdeveloped and it actually shortens down, and it stays shortened down. It just stays in that shortened length, and now it doesn't stretch out anymore, and it's weaker than it should be. And so you actually see somebody who just loses strength reaching overhead over time, even though they've been doing that movement every day. You'd think they'd be great at it, but it actually, in the end, actually makes them worse at it. And so that's sort of one of the ways that we get it. A lot of times we see like that Instagram booty, right? The anterior pelvic tilt. You got to remember what's happening there, right? I'm going to use my bed here, right? So if I'm sitting down, right, my hips are in a flexed position, right? My hips are coming this way, and my glutes are in a lengthened position. So I'm stretching this out and I'm shortening this down, right? And so then when I go to stand, rather than just standing in like a neutral posture, I stand kind of like this. I get this like super intense arching motion going down, because this muscle, which has been shortened all day, wants to stay shortened. And this muscle, which has been lengthened all day, is allowing it to stay lengthened. So this muscle is not pulling me back down, and this muscle is pulling me forward. So I have an altered posture, right? So a lot of times it's, repetitive movement patterns. That's the most common reason we end up with these muscle imbalances. So the three most common: pronation distortion syndrome, lower cross syndrome, and upper cross syndrome. I want you guys to get super, super familiar with these terms. I want you to know them inside, outside, backwards, and forwards. So how do we spot pronation distortion syndrome? What is that, right? So this is characterized by flattened or externally rotated feet. And you can do this yourself, by the way. If you guys get up right now, I'm gonna go ahead and tilt this down. If you guys get up right now and you just stand, right? Stand sort of like neutral with your toes pointing forward, but then just flatten your feet like this. Just all I want you to do is just rotate here. You know what? All right. This is gonna be weird. Hold on, I need to have shorts for this. It was really cold this morning. All right. Very odd. But I gotta be able. You guys gotta see the knee.
Hey, so would the kettlebell fix that posture right there?
Maybe. But again, pretty explosive movement. And we want slow movements. So I'm going to tell you what's going to fix it. So if I've got this happening, right? Watch this. Look at this. I'm just moving my feet, but do you see how much movement is happening in my knees? See how they're caving in towards each other? The only thing I'm trying to move is my ankle. But again, it's a chain, right? Everything is connected. So when I move the feet inwards, guess what? My knees cave inwards as well. So what pronation distortion syndrome is it's flattened feet, the inside arch of the foot's flattening down, or externally rotated feet. Sometimes you'll see that as well, rather than just, I'm keeping my toes forward as I flatten. Sometimes you'll also see this. You'll see like sort of that duck posture, right? And you'll notice like my knees are still kind of facing forwards, even though my feet are turned this way. My knees should be facing outwards if I'm like this, but they're not. They're just kind of going this way. So those are the two that you'll often see. And then at the knees, you'll see adducted and internally rotated knees. You look at the kneecap, you'll notice it's rotating towards the middle. They're both kind of pointing like this towards the midline. So what muscles are tight? Why is this happening? What muscles got so tight that they stopped stretching out? So, and actually just really quickly, Charlie, Eugenia, I know you guys are new to this. We're gonna go through a lot of muscle names here real quick. Don't let this intimidate you. You're gonna learn these muscles over time. So the muscles that are overactive are going to be your gastrocnemius muscle, right? So that's your calf, right? So when you look at the gastrocnemius, that's both sides of the calf. So that's, you have got two sides of these fibers here. You've got the lateral fiber, whoops. You have the lateral fibers on the outside and you get the medial fibers on the inside, right? So lateral fibers here, medial fibers here, medial, lateral, right? Generally, I would say the lateral ones, it's the gastrocnemius in general that's overactive. But generally it's the lateral side that's kind of the big bad here. So it's not that you can't, if you have a client with pronation distortion, it's not that you can't do any calf raises. But if you do calf raises, you want to focus on the middle calf, not that lateral calf. If you do them, and I honestly wouldn't do them at all. And then the other one is the soleus, which is also a calf muscle. And you can actually see the soleus in some of these other pictures because the soleus is behind your gastrocnemius. It actually is running underneath it right here. And so you can see they both are in the same area, right? But the soleus is a little bit more exposed down here at the bottom. And you can feel a difference between these guys. If you want to stretch your gastrocnemius versus your soleus, here's that classic wall. You know that classic wall calf stretch where you go like this? And if you guys have ever done this stretch before, right? So that's a stretch for the back of your calf, right? Now, you will feel that when you do it up here. You'll feel that in the upper sort of portion of your calf, right? This sort of big meaty part here. But if you want to feel it in your soleus, which is generally down here, you have to make one small adjustment. You just go like this. And rather than keeping that leg straight, all you got to do is just bend that knee. So see how I bent my knee forward and started pushing my knee towards the ground? Suddenly that stretch is going to move from here down to here. So if anybody in the call, or if you have a client, and they always describe, they're like, you know, I just get like my Achilles feels really tight, right? Like that's really like almost down at their heel, right? They're like, you know, I feel like this area down here is really tender. So if that's the case, you want to loosen up their calves in general, but their soleus is really what makes up that Achilles tendon. So that second version with the bent knee, that's what's going to really help. So those are two of the most common overactive muscles that are often causing this, right? The reason why is because what those muscles do is they do plantar flexion, right? So the gastrocnemius does this. My soleus does this, right? It's in charge of like pointing my toes down, which raises me up, right? So those are the muscles that are overactive, which means I'm basically when I have this posture, my body just wants to walk around like this all day, like up on my toes, you know? But that's not good. That's not how I'm designed to walk, you know? So what I need to do is I need to turn those overactive muscles off. I need to stretch that calf out, right? So that's one of the most common ones. Now, other probable overactive muscles in pronation distortion syndrome are going to be the hip flexors. Now, I want to put a little bit of an asterisk on this because I do want to show you your whole hip flexors here. So again, this is sort of a note for those of you who have been through our kinesiology class, but remember your hip flexor complex is all this, right? Like it's your psoas, it's your iliacus, that's your iliopsoas. It's the TFL, and then you don't even see the quads here. It's the rectus femoris, the sartorius, and the gracilis, right? All of those are hip flexors. You think all of those are causing this knees cave in situation? Probably not. But the ones that are really a big problem here, let's look at what this is, right? This is a little bit of internal hip rotation. Remember, pronation distortion is this internal rotation here, right? The hip is experiencing this internally. So which hip flexor is responsible for that internal rotation? Well, it's going to be this. Hold on. I pulled up the wrong picture. There we go. It's going to be this one right here, right? This tensor fascia latae, the TFL and the IT band, which the IT band runs along and grabs the bone here, which is why it's causing that rotational movement. So it does say hip flexors, which is accurate because it is the hip flexors, but the big ones, guys, are going to be the tensor fascia latae, that's your TFL, and your IT band, which is still kind of part of that tensor fascia latae. So those are those internal, like these rotator muscles, right? So that's this little tiny muscle that runs from that bone on the front of your hip to that bone on the side of your hip, right? These two bones right here, that's your TFL. It runs from here to here, right? And when it pulls my bones like this. See how I'm like rotating my hip inward? That's what's happening. So what do I need to do to stretch it out? I need to turn it this way, right? And then it's also, this muscle does also assist in this motion, which is that hip flexion, right? So how do I stretch it? Well, I take it behind me instead. So what I do is I take it back and I turn my foot out. And by doing both those things simultaneously, and then if I want to give a little reach too, that can help. Now I'm getting a big, deep stretch right in this hip flexor, that TFL right there. So again, if I'm caving in like this, this muscle is causing that. It's internally rotating. So I need to stretch it out. So that's the TFL there in pronation distortion syndrome. And then the last one, and this is the one that's always confusing the first time you've heard this, is the biceps femoris, which has nothing to do with your biceps. Your biceps femoris short head. And that is a little tiny hamstring muscle. This little tiny hamstring muscle that is the freaking devil. I hate this muscle because it's really tight on me, so I'm going to be mean when I talk about this muscle. It's this little tiny short muscle. Actually, that's not a good one. That's the whole hamstring. I want just.
That's why you be cramping up a lot, huh?
Yeah, man. I hate this muscle. I was getting cramped up on Saturday.
Dude, I get the worst cramps.
Yeah. All day, guys. This is your stretch right here. All day. You don't have to go super high. A lot of people make the mistake of just going super high up. Keep it low. Go to just a regular sized bench, and then your hips will one open, rotate away. So that's almost like it's crossing over your body. This is your stretch. And it's awful and it's the devil's stretch, but trust me, it's very good for you. So it's this little short muscle right here, and you'll feel it right behind the back of the knee. But again, look at it, right? See how that's grabbing the fibula right there? That is a fibular external rotator, which is kind of confusing because we're talking about knees internally rotating here, but look at the relation. See how this is outside compared to this? That's why that muscle's short. This muscle right here is pulling it this way. And that's why we're seeing the biceps femoris short head. So when we see knees caving in, tight calves, tight and I forgot about the adductors. Oh, where the heck is my adductor? Oh, that's weird. Tight calves, tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, and tight adductor complex. So the other one, right? This one makes the most sense. We see someone's knees caving this way. Well, the muscles that adduct, right, are overactive. So we need to just stretch that out like this, right? We just need to take that leg away and get a nice deep adductor stretch on the inside of the thigh. So those are all the stretches that we need to do. So if I looked at that and I wanted to write a program for it, well, guess what? It would look something kind of like this. So with pronation distortion, right, we have possible overactive muscles, the two calf muscles. Also, the peroneals are going to be on this list, although that's a little bit of an advanced note. That's the muscle on the side of your shin, actually. along the outside that grabs the top of your foot. So that actually runs here and grabs your foot, and it causes this type of motion like this. I wouldn't worry too much about that, but the way you stretch that is actually take your leg behind you and drop it kind of like that. You'll feel a big stretch on the top of your foot. Adductors, IT band, hip flexors, biceps femoris. So that's the list that we just looked at, right? And that's on my overactive list. That's on my list that is short, right? My muscles that are super bunched up that I need to lengthen out, right? So guess what? They are on the warm-up. I'm going to foam roll first. I'm going to get on that foam roller and I'm going to massage out my calves, maybe the peroneals, the adductors, the IT band. I wouldn't foam roll the IT band, but it's just because it causes too much. It's too painful. Hip flexors and hamstrings. And then there they are. I'm going to do a static calf stretch, static soleus stretch, static peroneal stretch, right? I'm going to hold each of these stretches for 30 seconds. I could do even better. I could do them, I don't have to do one set. I could do 2 sets on everything. Whoop.
Right. So you're saying set wise, would it depend how the client feels, or what do you recommend?
It depends on like what your job is for the day. If you're doing a full-on session, this is the world's longest warm-up. This will take you, this is going to be 20 minutes right here,
Right.
So you probably won't have enough time for that in a regular session. But if you were to give it to your client as homework, you could do 2 sets of everything. In a real life situation, this is a lot. This is already like a 10-minute warm-up right here, and that's only 1 set of everything. So, when you're writing a program like that, you got to kind of consider what it is. What I like to do is in my first couple sessions with somebody, I won't do as many strength training sets as I actually want them to do on the full program.
Okay.
So like, let's say I've got you doing 3 sets of 15, right? We'll say, just for the sake of argument, that's what the program is going to be. It's going to be a total body program, 3 sets of 15. Week 1, I'm just going to try to teach you the movements. So maybe I only do 2 sets of 15, and then our warm-ups are longer so that I can really teach you how to warm up. Then it's like, okay, Charlie, week 1 is over. I'm going to see you again on Friday. I want you to practice this warm-up so that you do it. And I want you to show up. Our session is at 8 a.m. I want you here at 7:30 doing your warm-up, and your warm-up is finished by the time our session starts. That way we can go straight into your strength training. But if I don't see you warming up, I'm gonna have to stretch you out. Does that make sense?
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah. That's often what I used to do. That's what I do in the real world, because then you have more time to kind of work on that stuff. That's also why I always pick my clients up in the same spot in the gym every time, which is always near the stretching area. So if I don't see them stretching, I know they didn't do their homework. All right. So now, before we get into that, let's look. So now we've kind of addressed the tight stuff, right? But here's the thing. This is one of the biggest mistakes. Let's you know what? Let's do this. We're not watching one of these videos, but stretching and posture. Let's see here. I'm typing stretching and posture. You know what? I'm not getting as many as I thought. Okay. I was definitely expecting a million clickbait videos that were like, don't stretch to fix your posture. You hear that? That's getting to be really popular in the world. And they're not 100% wrong when they say that, but a lot of people will stretch and stretch and stretch and stretch. And they're just like, man, I'm still tight. Why is this not getting better? And here's the problem. You got to remember, go back to this picture here. I pull this picture up every freaking day. But like, you stretched this side, right? And that's great. So now this is nice and loose, but you didn't move this bone back because you didn't strengthen this side. You loosened everything up on one side, but you didn't pull it back on the other side. And that's why a lot of people's posture doesn't get better over time. And they're like, I stretch all the time and my posture still sucks. And it's like, yeah, you're only addressing one side of the joint. We got to address the other side. We got to go, you were pulled this way, you loosened this up, but we got to pull you back this way. And that's where strengthening your underactive muscles comes in. So now we've addressed the tight stuff. Oops. We've addressed the probable overactive stuff, the tight muscles. Now we need to strengthen the weak stuff. And you'll notice this list of muscles, guys, is just going to jump from one side of the bone to the other bone every single time. So the gastrocnemius and the soleus, right? Those were your calves. These muscles, they were overactive. They were too tight. Well, guess what? We're going to jump to this side of the bone. These muscles are weak. So your anterior and your posterior tibialis muscles, those are your shin muscles, right? They're the ones that pull your toes. This is going to be really hard for me. See if I can get this up high enough. They're the ones, oh, that's not so bad. They're the ones that pull your toes this way, right? So your calf does this, your shin does this. So we need to get you to pull your toes up. So that's your anterior and posterior tibialis, right? The vastus medialis oblique, that's a quadricep muscle on the inside of your thigh. It's the teardrop, actually. If you look at your quads, you can kind of see that kind of bulgy one on the inside of your knee. That's your VMO. That's your vastus medialis oblique. It runs the whole quad here. Guess what? That is the exact opposite of that biceps femoris, right? Biceps femoris is on the back. Vastus medialis is on the front. Biceps femoris is lateral. Vastus medialis is medial. So we're just doing the opposite, right? We move across the joint. Your gluteus maximus, right? This is a hip flexor. Your glute is a hip extensor, right? So this is weak. And your glute medius, right? Your glute medius is a hip abductor. Your adductors are hip adductors. So your knees are caving in. I want to strengthen this to cave your knees out. And then lastly, hip external rotator, same thing. Hip external rotators, little tiny like piriformis muscle. So that's your underactive list, right? So we need to strengthen those. That's this list, right? Again, anterior tib, posterior tibialis, by the way. I will often shorten that to just, I will say tib. If I move too quick through these guys, let me know. I have the bad habit of abbreviating sometimes. Vastus medialis oblique, more commonly referred to as VMO. Glute max, gluteus medius, and your hip external rotator. So here's our strength program for fixing that pronation distortion syndrome. We're going to do a bridge with abduction. So a hip bridge, right? Can you guys see me? Is this, right? That classic, just like bridge up. But I also want to do a little bit of like abduction. So I'm going to put a resistance band around my knees so that I can squeeze against it as I bridge up. And that's what's going to really help with strengthening both of my glutes simultaneously. It'll strengthen my gluteus medius, which does this, and it will strengthen my gluteus maximus, which does this simultaneously. Modified side plank with abduction. So that's your classic. So this would be a regular side plank with abduction. Modified side plank would just be on your knees. And then you would just lift one leg up. Right? Again, I'm strengthening the side of my butt so that I can pull my knees outward, right? Step up to balance in the frontal/transverse plane. So step up to balance is this. So we face this way. You step and you come up, right? Step up to balance in the frontal plane is actually where you face this way. Okay. And then the transverse one is actually where you turn, step, and then unturn. And then box jump to stabilization, which I am not doing on my little decorative bench. But I would jump onto a box and I would hold. Okay. So, Noel, you asked me earlier, right? Would a kettlebell fix any of this? Yeah, maybe if you use it the right way. But these are a little bit of a better prime example because there's much more time under tension. I'm giving my brain more time. Look at the tempo, right? The tempo is very controlled, or I'm holding it for 3 seconds. So it's like a very slow tempo. That's going to be much better at teaching my brain how to do something rather than something that moves super fast. What's up, Charlie? Do you have a question? I thought I heard you for a sec.
Oh, no. You're good. Thank you, bro.
Okay. Any questions about this, by the way? How are we feeling? Eugenia, how you feeling?
I'm taking notes.
I'm okay. Thank you.
Good deal, guys. Noel, what about you?
Yeah. I got a question. You can use weights with those too, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
These are kind of basic, but
Like dumbbells.
you can absolutely, yeah.
You can absolutely, yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. If you did a box jump to stabilization with weights, I would want you to hold them here. I don't like it when people do that box jump with like weights on their shoulders, just because it kind of loads the spine in a weird way. Okay, so I just went through a big, long explanation on that first postural distortion. We got 2 more to go through. So that's the knees cave in, feet turn out. That's pronation distortion syndrome. Now, we're gonna look at lower cross syndrome. But before we do, I do wanna show you a video of someone who explains this better than I do. And it's all right, we're gonna watch a little video here real quick. And we're just gonna look at a quick fix. This is just for the feet turnout. So this is not addressing the glute part. This is only addressing the foot part. But it does get a little bit of glute stuff. So we're gonna watch this little video real quick, and I'm gonna hush up and sort of show you how this works.
Hey y'all, this is Rick. I'm with Annie, NASM, and I've been watching Annie's overhead squat, and she's got her feet turning out like this, all right? So as her feet turn out, we're gonna go through a corrective exercise series with Annie to try to remedy that. So the first thing we're gonna look at is we have to release some muscles. So the muscles we're gonna release are going to be the calves, right? So gastrocnemius, the soleus. Then we're gonna go through some lengthening techniques for that. We're gonna stretch them. And then we're going to activate the underactive muscles. We're looking at the anterior and the posterior tibialis. I'm going to show you where those are and how to do them. And then we're going to get into some more of like an integrated stabilization technique so that we get her functioning in normal movement patterns, not just an isolated movement pattern. So Annie, let's get.
Okay, so what he's going through here, by the way, I forgot to mention, you will notice that this title of this video is NASM CES quick fix. So he's going through a 4-step process. This is slightly more advanced than what we do in the regular standard training session. This is a corrective exercise training session here. So he's going to inhibit the overactive stuff first, lengthen the overactive stuff second, strengthen by isolating the underactive stuff, and then integrating the underactive stuff. So he's going to turn off, and then he's going to switch to the other side of the joint and turn on, which is totally what we do in a normal session. It's just in your capstone classes in corrective, they break it down step by step a little bit. It's just a little bit more broken down. But it still very much applies to sort of how we would run our sessions.
Let's start. So we're just going to show you what to do on the right side. Now, this is going to be at the highlight version. So Annie's going to do is she's going to release these calves, keep the foot completely relaxed, and she's going to do a search and destroy. So she's going to roll through, try to find out where those tense spots are. And what she's done is she's taken the other leg, added it on top, put some weight on it, put a little bit of pressure on it. Now she's lifted up her backside. She's going to put a little more pressure on it, but make sure these muscles stay relaxed in the feet. All right. Now, once Annie finds that spot, I'm going to have her just rest her backside down, and then she can take that top leg and put some additional pressure on it, so that way she's not holding herself up the entire time. Some of your clients, like Annie, will be able to do it. Some of the clients not going to be able to do it. Might hurt people's wrists. So just have a seat when you do this. That's what I do. So now she's gone through the release, the iliosoleus, the gastrocnemius release. Normally, you'd look for at least 2 spots released for 30 seconds. Let's assume that we've done that. Hop up and let's get some stretching in. So we're going to do stretch specifically for the calves here. So Annie's going to go into that stretch. Now realize that her feet turn out. So when she stretches, that foot's going to have to be straight ahead, maybe even slightly internally rotated, because if it's short this way, then we're going to lengthen it more by straightening it up. So let's keep it in a neutral position. And what Annie can do here is that normally she'd be up against a wall or she'd be on a slant board, so we're just giving you the visual. What I want you to do, go ahead and press into me if you need to, lean forward. She's going to drive the heel into the ground. You're going to lock out your knee, and then, strangely, but this works, she's going to squeeze her glute. So get that butt cheek squeezed, glutes tight, quads tight, heel drives down. And it's interesting, the glute squeeze it actually helps her to supinate, which gets her out of pronation. So we're going to go through this, and it's just a perfect example of how connected the body is, right? So glutes tight, quads tight, heel driven down. She's released that muscle for 30 seconds. Let's go into some activations. So the activation, she's going to stay on that same foot. And I'm going to have Annie now go into, let's do an isolated activation, and then we'll do an integrated activation. So go ahead and let's drop you down. Put your foot on the roller. And she's going to do an activation for her anterior tibialis. So the tibia is this bone right here. Anterior tibialis is this muscle. You can see it on this leg. So that muscle activates by going into dorsiflexion and inversion. So this is eversion, this is inversion. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to resist that. So I'm going to resist dorsiflexion, which is the foot going up, and inversion. So I'm pulling at this angle. I'm also holding her ankle because I don't want to pull this direction and make her hip work. So I'm just going to stabilize it. Go ahead and slowly come down and then back up. Good. So that is your anterior tib activation. Your posterior tib activation is plantar flexion with inversion. So she's going this direction. So again, I'm going to hold her foot and I'm pulling against the inversion. So go ahead and slowly undo it. And go ahead and plantar flex and invert. Good. Go one more time, invert, more, squeeze it. Now hold it there, don't let me move you. And slowly come with me. So she's getting the eccentric activation here. And relax. So now that we've done some isolated activation, let's do some integrated stuff. So hop up. Have her do some balance exercises. So you're going to stand on that same leg you just did activations with. And she's going to go into, let's say instead of a multiplanar reach, instead of doing 1, 2, 3, let's just have your hands on the hips and make circles. All right. Now, as she's doing this, and you as a coach or a trainer are going to be watching her to make sure the hips are completely level. So if you see the hips moving this way and she's starting to shift, you're going to move that hip out to the side, make sure she's neutral. So if she's working at retail and she's typing some stuff up for you, you have no idea that the person behind the desk is doing some weird activations for her feet that turn out, right? So she's doing this, she's looking great. Now let's do an integrated exercise that integrates the upper body with the lower body. We're going to do a reverse lunge, and she's going to do the opposing arm, right? So if she stands on her right leg, it's her left hand that's going to be in the resistance, and you're standing on your right leg. Yeah, so let's go ahead and switch it. Reverse lunge, and instead of a press, she's going to do a row. So go ahead and reach back and stand up. Row, nice. So she's going to lock out that quad, squeeze that glute right there. Go ahead and reach back again and pull up. Now again, this is going to be a more difficult exercise doing a unilateral than if she did both at the same time, because it's easier to balance from her leg if she's using both of her hands. But I take this one away and she's doing the opposite side. She's got some crisscross activation in her body that she's got to stabilize down at her foot. All right, so it's her foot that's stabilizing this whole movement pattern here. All right, guys, that's it. Again, the highlighted version of a lower extremity postural dysfunction fix. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope it helped. If you have questions, let us know. Zanny, I'm Rick with NASM.
So there you go, right? That is, you can see like sort of how he flows through that stuff pretty quickly. You know, that obviously he wasn't doing he wasn't doing a full set of repetitions. He wasn't doing, but like he got through that whole explanation in 7 minutes. When you guys learn, you know, your corrective stuff, when you get to capstone and you kind of go through a little bit more of this, you know, that sort of replaces your traditional, what we call the, you know, that movement prep section, that core balance reactive section. And you kind of blend the whole thing, you know, together as sort of one corrective chunk, which is really how I like to run like a lot of my sessions, you know. I'll move through my stretches and then right into some sort of activation techniques. And then, you know, once I'm done with that, I go get a sip of water and then, you know, I hit my body parts. I hit the fun stuff, you know, get those vanity muscles from, you know, the Insanity DVDs, get them all strengthened. But this is where we're addressing the posture stuff. How's everybody feeling so far? Just do a little check-in. Did you guys like that video?
Yeah, that's good.
Helpful?
Yeah, that's doing it with the resistant bands, right?
Yeah. Yep. Which is always good, but
So-
you can do
Which
it.
is always good, but you can do it.
That means stability, right?
Yes. Yep. Very much so.
Yes. Yep. Very much so.
Which is what we want. We're really focusing on stability when we're talking about muscle activations, you know, because the more unstable something is, the more your brain has to be like, oh God, all right, I'll pay attention, you know? Whereas when something's really stable, your brain's like, yeah, I mean, we're doing it, you know, like kind of slacks off a little. All right, we got 2 more postural distortions. Let's take a look. Those notes. Let's take a look at the next one here, lower cross syndrome and anterior pelvic tilt. So you can see what's happening here. This guy's pelvis is not sitting straight, right? So you can actually feel this on yourself and you can sort of test to see how your pelvis is sitting. Now, you actually don't want this to sit perfectly level. You want to have an ever so slight tilt, but you don't want to have a super extreme tilt. But you do want to have, they're not supposed to sit perfectly level. But what you look for is feel on the front of your hip, right? You can feel these really like stiff, hard, bony parts right here. This is called your anterior superior iliac spine. Everybody calls it the ASIS. So your ASIS, oh, of course. Okay. I was like, is this little knob right here on the front of your pelvis, okay? It's this little bone that you can kind of feel right here. And then you've also got one on the back of your body called your PSIS. That's on either side of your sacrum there. And that's this little knob back here. So you can actually feel those two. Your ASIS, I put my thumb on it, and my PSIS, I put my other thumb on that, right? And you'll notice mine actually do sit level. That is because I have a slight posterior pelvic tilt. I have kind of what I like to call old man butt. But ideally you want to sit these, that's why I have a hard time showing you guys a really bad anterior pelvic tilt, but you want them to sit just slightly at a forward angle, just a little bit. But what you don't want to see is this crazy forward angle where we see like a super intense arch in the low back, you know, where this is just tilting like crazy there, right? So that's what we call lower crossed syndrome.
Lower crossed syndrome.
I think that's what I got too.
Very,
Low
very
cross
common.
syndrome.
Very common.
Yeah, you drive, right?
Especially
Yeah,
in
you drive,
African Americans. Especially in African Americans, right?
So I wouldn't say it's necessarily like, I don't necessarily think that's like a structural cause. But I know what you're talking about. I like where you'll see sometimes, you'll see like this kind of a little bit of like, even like a lean like this, right? Is that what you're talking about? That is a little bit different. But I'd say this is just common in everybody. It's common in people who sit. That's where we're going to see it in. If you sit, you're like if you have a desk job, you're going to see a lot of tight hip flexors. So what's happening here, we call this lower crossed syndrome. And the reason it's called lower cross syndrome is because it makes a cross, it makes an X. You basically have tight muscles in your low back, and you have tight muscles in your hip flexors. And you have weak muscles in your glutes and weak muscles in your abs. You go tight to tight, weak to weak, and it makes an X there. So when we see that, right, we see that anterior pelvic tilt, right? These muscles in the low back right here, this is called your erector spinae. It's overactive, and so it's scooping, it's grabbing the back of it's grabbing my PSI, it's pulling it upwards, right? Meanwhile, I've been sitting all day, right? And so my hips are used to being in this position. So because they want to be here, when I drop them down, they pull my spine down here. So now sorry, not my spine, my pelvis. So now my pelvis is being pulled down in the front and it's being pulled up in the back. And there it is. That's the anterior pelvic tilt, right? Now, what's the opposite of my low back that does spinal? We call this spinal extension, right? Well, what does spinal flexion? That's your abdominals, right? So your abdominals are in charge of spinal flexion. They're in charge of like crunching you this way. So they're not stabilizing your spine in the front, which is why it's being allowed to scoop. Meanwhile, if my hips are in charge of flexion, my glutes, which are in charge of extension, they're being weak, right? So now I'm being pulled down rather than this muscle pulling me back to neutral. It's not happening, right? So that's the lower cross. So let's see our list here, right? Lower cross syndrome is going to be characterized by an anterior pelvic tilt, and it's going to be tight. You're going to see the calves here again really quick, which always kind of surprises people. But Noel, this is what you were talking about, right? Remember, you're saying like where we see sometimes you see like the lean. That is often a tight calf thing, because their calves don't flex back. Their calves want to go this way. So what happens is instead, if you do that, you're going to feel like you're falling backwards all day. So it's easier to counterbalance by doing this. So that is why those, sometimes people get confused by the calves being on this list. So like, why would the calves be causing the pelvis? That's why. It's a weight shift distribution thing. So calves again. And then we see the hip flexors, right there on the front being tight. And then the erector spinae being tight. Now here's kind of a weird one. The latissimus dorsi, your lats, these big muscles on sort of the wrap around the back of your body. So why would this muscle cause an anterior pelvic tilt? Well, your lats actually do assist a little bit in spinal extension. They're actually there to kind of create a little bit of stability back here. So you'll often find, if let's say you're trying to find somebody's anterior pelvic tilt, if they raise their arms up and it gets way worse, that is often a really easy to spot sign that they also need to stretch out their lats there. So that's a very common overactive muscle as well. So the muscles that are shortened are sometimes the calves, but the big ones are the hip flexors. Whoops. On the wrong list here. The big ones are like the calves. Sometimes it's the hip flexor complex. Sometimes it's the lats, and it is all often going to be the erector spinae. So these are all shortened, overactive muscles. Our weakened muscle, again, we're just going to jump to the other side of the joint. The calves, again, it's the shins that are underactive. The hip flexors were overactive. It's the glutes that are underactive, right? And then the transverse abdominis and the internal obliques are underactive. Those are your abdominal stabilizers. So again, the cross, right? So weak core, weak glutes, tight hips, tight low back. And that is very simply what that looks like. So let's scroll down here. So we looked at pronation distortion. Let's scroll down. And you're going to get this handout later today, guys. And we look at upper cross syndrome here. Where am I at? Did I not do? Oh no, I just scrolled past it fast. Sorry. All right. I need a second cup of coffee today. Lower cross syndrome, calves, hip flexors. I put the adductors on this list, which is not in the other list that we saw, just because there are certain adductors that do assist in hip flexion. So they'll pull sometimes. But the big ones, lats and erector spinae. So we foam roll the calves, hip flexors, adductors, and lats, and then we stretch them all out. And then our strengthening exercises are things like prone iso abs. That's NASM's big fancy way, by the way. Eugenia, Charlie, that's NASM speak for plank. NASM doesn't call it the plank. I don't know why. They call it the prone iso abs. So we would plank, right? That was my lazy plank. We would do, so that's going to strengthen the transverse abdominis and the internal obliques, right? Then we've got a stability ball bridge, which unfortunately I don't have a ball up here today. But imagine my upper back is on a ball right here. So a stability ball bridge would be where I would go like this, and I would bridge straight up. So what I'm doing is I'm strengthening my glutes right here, right? So that's a lot of hip extension. Again, that's strengthening the opposite of my hip flexors. Single leg Romanian deadlift. So if I had a dumbbell in my hand here, right, and then I'm going to go straight down like this, I've got it in my opposite arm, and I'm going to go down, and then I'm going to squeeze my glute, and that's going to bring me back up. So I'm strengthening, again, my glute. I will say you want to be a little cautious on this one. When you do a single leg RDL, sometimes you'll see people do this super extra intense low back arch. You don't want to do that because that's the erector spinae. So that's where you're starting to get into a little bit of like danger. It's like, oh, hold on, you're kind of strengthening something that's already overactive. Just make sure they don't overarch their back when they're doing their deadlift. And then split lunges, right, where they hold and then switch. Again, that's a glute exercise, and they're creating stability when they're down. So that is, that's a program that would address that anterior pelvic tilt. Do you guys have any questions about those exercises or why we picked those?
No, for the most part, yeah. I mean, kind of makes sense why some of those would, chosen.
Cool. By the way, there's other videos out there. You should check out YouTube. YouTube's got tons, there's trainers on YouTube who are just constantly addressing these programs. They do a really good job. I like a lot of those videos.
And these that you just went over were for lower cross syndrome, right? For anterior
the
tilt.
anterior tilt. Yep.
And then the tight muscle would be, like you said, lats. What else?
So lats, hip
Yeah.
flexors, low back.
Okay.
Sometimes there are certain adductors too that pull down in the front, and there's other adductors that pull down in the back. So it's not all of the adductors, but some of them. So sometimes you'll be working with a client who's got a tilt, and you're just like, man, we're like, this is not good. And then all of a sudden you'll throw a little adductor stretch in there, fixes the whole problem. You're like, it was the weird one, and that's usually like, I've found that, this is weird, but I found that in typically like when it's like an anterior pelvic tilt, certain women who work in like very like corporate America, where they're wearing like business skirts, and they have to do that knee together thing all day. Sometimes you'll see it's like adductors, because they're just squeezing like all day. So sometimes you'll see like that as a habit, which is something that you don't really identify right away until you ask your clients like, what do you wear to work? And they're like, that's a weird question. It's like, yeah, but it's like, humor me. Are you wearing heels all day? And they're like, yeah, I wear heels all day. And it's like, okay, that explains the tight calves. You're wearing like a skirt. We have to you're like sitting upright all day in like a very upright, like over very super conservative, like dress situation. And they're like, yeah, I do. Why do you ask? It's like, got it. Okay. I can see it in your posture. It's weird. Those things, you can spot those things. And then they come up in conversation later.
Got it.
Okay, last one. Let's look at the upper cross syndrome. This thing, right? We are seeing rounded shoulders and a forward head posture. I feel like it's almost at this point, it's like everybody who's got a cell phone has this problem. This is static posture. It's characterized by rounded shoulders and a forward head. So our probable overactive muscles. The thing about rounded shoulders, guys, is it's not just like a rounding, it's also protraction of the shoulders, right? And it's also, and that protraction often happens as well. I'm gonna keep my shoulders back, but all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my palms this way and watch what happens to my shoulders just flipping my palms, right? So that's also rounding. So we're looking at 3 distinct things that can cause just the shoulder part. It can be the spine, like curving. It can be the shoulders protracting, and it can be the shoulders internally rotating. So 3 things that can cause this one, you know, very easy to do. So the biggest one, the most common, is going to be your lats. Again, going back to that lat, right? This muscle here is in charge of pulling your arms down like this. So that's shoulder adduction. It's also in charge of pulling your arms back like this. That's shoulder extension. And one of the biggest things that it does is that it rotates your palms this way. It does internal rotation. So you think about like somebody who's having a hard time, it makes a lot of sense that their shoulders, you know, when they have tight lats, you can spot tight lats. This is not an official NASM assessment, but when you look at someone's posture and they stand, if you see their hands rest on the front of their thighs and their thumbs face each other, that's a sign that they have too much internal rotation. They should sit a little further off to the side and their thumbs should face forward. So you can spot too much internal rotation right away. That's not, I will look for that when people walk into the gym. Like I like, you know, I'm like, thumbs, you know? So that's your latissimus dorsi. That's a very overactive one. Another one that obviously causes shoulder rounding are both of your pectoral muscles. So your pec major, which is in charge of this, that's horizontal adduction, right? And then your pec minor, which is the little short one, that does shoulder protraction. So let me show you here, pectoralis major. That's the big one. It ties to your humerus, right? It ties to the bone here on your arm, right? So obviously that can pull the arm forward, right? But your pectoralis minor, it doesn't actually tie into your humerus. It ties onto your scapula. It ties onto your shoulder blade. Your shoulder blade's got this little bone that pokes forward like this, and your pec minor grabs that bone. You can see it right here. So, you know, pec major would run over to here. Pec minor grabs this. So your pec minor is not involved during a chest fly, but it does go like this. It pulls your scapula forward, and it's also grabbing the top of your scapula, so it also tilts your scapula this way. So it's because it's like pulling down on it like that, right? So it's like pulling it forward. So it causes it here and it causes it here simultaneously. So really the 2 biggest muscles on this list, the real big bads, guys, latissimus dorsi and pectoralis minor. Pectoralis major is a bad guy too, but like, trust me, this is the really big one. So that's addressing the rounding part of the shoulders. Now we got to look at the neck to figure out what's causing this, right? And that's where we see what's called your levator scapulae. It's this little short neck muscle back here. Think about the name, levator scapulae. It elevates your scapula. So it's in charge of this actually. That's what it's supposed to do. It's a little neck muscle that raises your shoulders up this way. But again, it's tied at an angle. So what it instead does is it kind of tilts you this way. So that's your levator scapulae. Your upper trapezius, and now let me show you that. So a little short muscle back here, right? Actually, that's a better picture. A little short muscle right here. Then we see your upper trapezius, right? Which is right here. That's the big, these are your traps, right? You know, when you do shrugs, which by the way, no one's allowed to do shrugs anymore. That exercise is a waste of time. I know. People are like, it looks so good though. I don't care. Kill it. If you're a bodybuilder, you're allowed to do shrugs. That's it. So that's your upper trapezius, right? And then your scalenes, which are these little tiny ones on the side of the neck that are slightly in the front, right? So they pull you this way. And then my favorite muscle, Eugenia, here's a big one for you. The sternocleidomastoid. It's the longest named muscle that you've got. And it's this huge muscle on the front of your neck. You can feel it. If you actually poke right here and you're like, oh God, that's kind of tender. That's what we call it, your SCM. That's your sternocleidomastoid. I hate this muscle. I'm like, oh, that's tender. This is one of the tightest muscles I got. A whole lot of tension there. So those are all the overactive. And then one more. We got one more on the list of overactive. And that is going to be your teres major. So this is not part of your rotator cuff, but it lives near them. And it's this little tiny muscle that lives on the back of your shoulder blade. Actually, that's better. And it runs under your armpit. So it runs, actually, I can kind of do this. It runs like this. See how my arm's poking through there? It runs from the back of my shoulder blade under my armpit and grabs the front of your bone here. And it causes internal rotation. It causes you to rotate. It does this, right? So when you think about it, right? So those are all the overactive muscles. And you start thinking about it, you're like, every one of those makes perfect sense, right? We got the muscles that are protracting. We got the muscles that are internally rotating. And we've got the muscles that are cervically rounding. And then in my head, I've got the muscles that are either pulling me this way, or I've got the muscles that are tightening my shoulders up so much that that's rounding me forward. And then my head is just counterbalancing, right? So that is all of our overactive stuff. This is a long list. So now we just need to get all the muscles that just pull us back. We just need to get pulled backwards, right? You see those like face pulls, right? Best exercise in the world. I've made fun of Jeff Cavalier plenty of times, but the one thing he has totally got right, he is all about face pulls. They are great. Grab that resistance band, grab that cable machine, pull. Best exercise ever. So underactive muscles. One of them that sometimes surprises people is the serratus anterior. This is kind of a weird muscle to see on our underactive list because this muscle actually, it's attached to your scapula and it attaches to all your ribs here and it actually rounds your shoulders this way, which is why people are like, whoa. This person already has shoulder rounding. Why is it that a muscle that rounds the shoulders is underactive? Why do we strengthen a muscle that does the thing that they're already too good at? And that's a good thought to have because that is kind of confusing. But the thing is, when you look at where these attach, see how this is grabbing sort of the bottom fibers of your scapula here, right? Remember the big bad of our pec muscle was the one that was grabbing the top of your shoulder blade, angling it downward, right? Well, this grabs the bottom of your shoulder blade and angles it back upward. So that's actually why this is what we're strengthening. And I know that one's kind of weird because it's like the therapy for rounded shoulders is actually to do an exercise like this. How do you fix rounded shoulders? It's a little weird. You round your shoulders. So you're going to go into what's called a push-up plus. which is where you go here. And then what you do is you push like that. When you push from the bottom, and what that does is that teaches you how to, instead of be here, angle your scapula back upright. So that's kind of a weird exercise, but it's a very, 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 very good one. So serratus anterior, and then all the stuff that you probably expected. Your rhomboids. Your rhomboids are those little muscles between your shoulder blades. Right, these little muscles back here that pinch your shoulder blades back, pinch them together so that you get from being here to being back here. Your middle trapezius and your lower trapezius, which are these little short ones. The middle ones are here, and the lower ones are here, right? Sorry, 1 second, I got a student texting me. Okay, so middle traps, which are also in charge of pulling you back, and then lower traps, which are in charge of pulling you down, which doesn't seem like very much motion because it's not, but they also pinch back. So both of these fibers are going this way. And remember, the upper traps, which pulled you this way, are overactive. So the lower traps are going to get you back to here. So that involves a lot of like flying motions, but instead of doing that classic like reverse fly this way, we're actually going to kind of go into an A position where we kind of pull down and back like that. And then we've got the infraspinatus, which is kind of a surprising one as well. Infraspinatus, little tiny muscle. That's actually in your rotator cuff. I would say we should say rotator. It says infraspinatus on the list, but it should just say rotator cuff. Here's your whole rotator cuff. Here's the whole group, right? The infraspinatus is this one right here. Oops. Actually, let's pull up this picture a little bigger. Remember that teres major? This guy right here ties on the front. That causes the internal rotation. Well, all these other muscles tie to the back, so they cause external rotation. So you're going to get to strengthen that by doing things like this, where you actually externally pull your arm back, right? So any motion where you're pinching this way is very good. And that's going to help with that shoulder rounding. And lastly, your deep cervical flexors, which are in your neck. This is another one that sometimes surprises people because it's on the front of your neck and you're like, why would we strengthen something in the front of our neck when the head comes this way? Don't think of them as pulling the head this way. Think of them as sort of like the core of your neck. They're almost like your abs. They're there to create stability in your neck. And so you actually want to strengthen these by tucking your chin like this. Tuck your chin back, and that's actually going to strengthen that stabilizer. So you're doing things like bridges. This is going to be really hard to see, but sometimes you'll see people do like a bridge and they'll lay down to do their bridges, right? So they're going to do, they're going to do those hip raises, right? And they'll lay down like this. See how I'm looking behind me, right? So if I want to get a little bit of like neck work in, I'll just have my client lift their head up, tuck their chin, and lay it back down. Now I'm looking straight 90 degrees up. And then I can do my bridges, right? And that little adjustment there, that little chin tuck is super helpful. When I'm doing my chest presses, I want my clients tucking their chin. When they're doing their rows, tucking their chin. Double chin it, guys, all day. It's super good for your neck. Most people tend to kind of reach rather than just stabilize. So our program, right? We're going to stretch out the lats. We're going to stretch out the thoracic spine. the pecs, right? We're gonna stretch out the neck. You'll notice we don't have a very big foam rolling list here. Really, the only things we're doing is like just kind of mashing the upper back and the lats here. You can do foam rolling for your pecs. You just need to use like a lacrosse ball instead of like an actual foam roller. Or you can use like a lacrosse ball or like a Theracane on your neck too. You can even just use your hands, like just grab and find those little tender spots and be like, oh yeah, you know, that's okay. We just didn't put them on this list right here. So then we do all those stretches. I did put one active stretch in here, the pectoral wall stretch with external rotation. This is one of my favorite stretches. And it's actually where you go against a wall and you get stretched back. And then what you do is you just turn your palm back a little bit and then relax and then turn it back and relax. It's not very much motion, but it is one of my favorite stretches.
I had a quick question about, I know you mentioned the face pulls. Would that be considered a like an exercise or more of a stretch?
That's a strength exercise. Yeah, so I'd call that an upper back or like rotator cuff exercise.
Okay, so yeah, so it would work out mostly the upper back. You said. Would that be a part of like the middle and lower trap or?
Yep, middle lower trap. Well, middle trap. It's not really pulling your arms down this way, so it's not much of a low trap. So middle trap, rhomboids, and then it's all the face pull because you got to go like this. That's external rotation of the shoulder. So that is very much infraspinatus, teres minor, subscapularis. These little tiny muscles that rotate you this way.
All right, got it. Thank you.
So our strength exercises, we see the iso-prone cobra here. I love the plank. I think it's great. But the prone cobra is going to be really good. This is kind of like the Superman. You know, traditionally a Superman, you would go down and you would do that like arms up, lifting this way. Prone cobra is really similar, except that your arms are back here, so you get the low traps. So you're just going to lift and get those upper back muscles firing there, right? So you're getting a little bit of an A pull. That's really good for rhomboids, mid traps, low traps. Chin tuck bridges, kind of like the one I showed you, right? Tucking the chin and then doing that hip raise. No, the bridging part doesn't help.
I got a question. Hey, is that more like the Pilates or a yoga kind of thing?
It's our thing. They got it from us. I guess yoga's been around the longest. I'd say it's a trainer thing. And I'm not taking it back. But I'd say you could use it in all three. Now, this one is the most complicated on the list. This is the most complicated exercise of the whole day. Single leg, bent over, combo number 1. So there's two combos there that are the combo number 1 is what's referred to as a YTA. And what that means is that you raise your arm up in a Y, you raise it up in a T, and you raise it back in an A. So you're literally like, it's like YMCA, right? Like YTA. But it's a single leg bent over one, so it's a balance exercise. So what you're gonna do is you're actually gonna hinge at the waist, right? Just like this. And then you're gonna raise your arm up, Y, T, A. If my client doesn't have enough balance, that's okay. I can just have them do a regular bent over version, right? Y, T, A. And that's gonna really, really help, again, pull their shoulders back, right? It's all about strengthening those rhomboids, mid and lower traps. And then reverse medicine ball throw. I literally have a medicine ball in my hands, and then I would toss it back like this, straight up overhead. So I'm getting better at raising my arms up. That last one, not perfect, but it's, you know, at least one explosive movement on the list. The rest of them are nice and slow. And that's actually about all I got for you guys today. Those are our 3 most common postural distortions. We're going to move into, this was a lot of, these were kind of large lists. today, but starting in the second half of this class, we're going to look at smaller lists where we're going to look at just what's doing the foot, what's just doing the knees, what's just doing the hip, right? We're going to kind of break them down rather than like full on distortions. We're just going to look at body parts. And then we're going to get into the cardio assessments and things like that as well for the rest of this class. But how you guys feeling?
Oh, we're good. I mean, I feel like I'm gonna a lot of good information, Brad. Yeah.
It's good. Your first day, man. That's
Yeah,
you
it's like
can't.
a lot of things you're like mentioning, you know, just about like posture wise, you know, there's a lot of things that I noticed, like you just like in relatives now, you know.
Right, dude.
Yeah.
My shoulder I mean, I can see it right now. I'm like, put those down. Yeah. Eugenia, you feeling good? Noel, Raul, Robert?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool, cool.
right.
Okay.
Brad.
Oh, yeah, what's up?
So let's say someone has two of those. Let's say they have the anterior pelvic tilt and then like the shoulder rounding.
Mm-hmm.
Which one would we focus on first, or do we hit all of them at the same time?
Good question. So it kind of depends on what type of program you're going to write. With a lot of new clients, I like to do total body programs. That way I don't hit any one body part too much early on and leave them like completely like, because eventually they're going to have to hit leg day, you know, and then it's like they'll never come to the gym ever again after that. I like total body routines for brand new clients. The problem with total body routines is, well, now you got to kind of warm everything up, you know? So your warm up tends to be a little longer. So I'll address small parts of both simultaneously. I'll be like, I'm going to do the hip flexors and I'm going to do the lats. You know, like maybe I can only pick 2 or 3 muscles at a time, you know, because at least the lats involves, you know, that could be causing the anterior pelvic tilt and it could be related to their shoulder rounding. So that's one that's like, that's great. I'll put that on a list because that's on both of them, you know. Hip flexors are always a big cause. And then maybe I'll pick one other one. I'll probably do the pectorals because we definitely want to, you know, that. So yeah, like what I'll do is I'll kind of prioritize like the really big common ones. I start addressing it for about 30 days. And then like in their next routine, now that they're a little used to working out in general, maybe I can put them on like a 2-day workout. So they have like an A day and a B day. Upper body, lower body. That way I can really hit everything on upper body day, and then I can really hit everything on lower body day. So then they're addressing, you know, one distortion one day and the other distortion the next day. But that, Robert, I don't think there's a flat answer to that question. I think it's going to depend on how creative you are when it comes to writing your routines and how you want to do it. Does that answer?
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was thinking like if someone has 2 of those, it would keep them in stabilization for like longer than a month. But then you were talking about switching them up to the AB days, so that makes sense.
Oh man, you're gonna have train wrecks. I mean, you're gonna have people who just, it's like, all right, well, after looking at your assessments, you have everything. You know, it'll happen. You know, you're gonna have, and sometimes you just have to tackle one problem at a time, and really encourage them to do their homework. It's like my nephew, man. My nephew, his ankles are shot. All right. So class announcement. Tomorrow we're going to meet in person. So my email is going to go out today. And I say this every time, but remember, pay very close attention to this next sentence. The email will have the address for the park's parking lot. Go to that address. Do not Google the name of the park and then let Google Maps take you there. Go to the address that I send you, because inevitably there's like 3 parking lots and I want you to go to the right one. We're going to meet in the parking lot tomorrow. We're not going to meet at 8:30. We're going to meet at 9. That way, for those of you who, you know, obviously, like if you're traveling from certain places, we're going to be meeting in Van Nuys, which might be farther away than some of you are used to commuting. So I want to give you a little bit of extra time. So we're going to meet at 9, or if you can't make the 9 a.m. session, we're going to meet at 6 instead of 5:30 for the PM session. And what we're going to do is these 3 programs that I wrote today, we're going to be outdoors and we're going to do them. So you're going to kind of flow through these sessions, one or the other. I'm going to have them for some of you guys, and you're just going to pick which one. We can't do all 3 programs, but like you'll get a chance to kind of move through a whole session. And then I'll do a primer before you get into the movements, talking about these again, kind of like we talked about today. But these programs that you saw written down today, you're going to get to practice them a little bit tomorrow. And we'll get you guys paired up and you'll get a little bit of practice, like training each other and stuff. So that's our plan for tomorrow. We'll do little mock, sort of mock training sessions almost. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It'll all be, most of it you saw was body weight and core stuff, so we don't need heavy weights or anything. I'll have a couple resistance bands out there, and I won't forget my handles this time. But yeah, do you guys have any questions about? Yeah, I'd laugh it up.
How are we able to, let's say we want to go over some of the stuff you went over today, like the recording? Do we have access to that? Or
oh yeah. So Charlie, stick around with me. I'm gonna end the call, and then everybody can leave. Stick around with me for 5 minutes. I want to get you signed up on the it's called Canvas.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get you signed up for that, and then we'll have you. You'll be all set.
All right, understood.
All right, guys. That's about it. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the end record, and I'll see you guys. See you tomorrow.